Hello, welcome to the Nurture Pod. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards. And this is the place where we're exploring that field. There's that Rumi quote. There is a place out beyond right and wrong. I'll meet you there. I think we're
Yeah,
trying for that.
nice.
Um, yeah.
Here
What are
we are.
you nurturing, my love?
I was gonna ask you that same question. I am nurturing. Let's see. I just took a walk on the beach, and I've been listening to this book on tape. Rick Rubin's book. We're gonna talk about creativity today. We had a pre-arranged topic, so I was actually preparing myself, which I
Oh.
normally we just wing it. But this week I was like, I'm gonna listen to this book. It was given me my friend Kelly last birthday, and I've looked at it, but now I'm actually I'm really grateful that you asked me to talk about creativity because all of a sudden I was like, yeah. So I was listening to him as I walked on the beach, and he has a very Buddhist kind of vibe to him, and I was just noticing nurturing my ability to be aware of things, just be aware without thinking about them. So kind of like a walking
Mm.
meditation, which he really indicates is a big part of the creative process, is just to be aware of your ability to take in beauty or whatever, wonder. And seafoam is really cool. I just gotta say that if anybody
Oh,
needs to really trip out without any drugs at all, you just walk on the beach as foam is like washing up and leaving these like magical floating balls of bubblies, and then they move around and they create new shapes, and they ease, and they kind of, as the water undulates underneath them, they move. Anyway, I started really having an interesting walk just playing with seafoam, and it was making these kind of patterns all over the beach, which if you wanted to could just kind of turn into like a little labyrinth. I was following like little breaks in them where I could walk through, and I was just walking the foam line, and then every once in a while a wave would come up and wash it all away and reset the whole thing in front of me. And the sun was setting, and there was kind of a low fog, and there wasn't very many people out. So the whole thing was just really, well, I definitely could have just stomped down the beach thinking about something else, or listening to,
mm.
as I normally do, I watching my dog or whatever. I was just really keenly aware of how incredibly magic this one moving line of, creation was, this bubbly seafoam. So I just got back
Oh,
from doing that. So that's what I'm nurturing right now.
oh my God. I'm so glad I asked you because that was great.
Good.
Oh, it's totally. I I went outside to the woodshed today. That was my big outdoor adventure. I went and got
That can be very magical.
oh not no, I needed to. But yeah.
What are you nurturing? I was going to ask you. You jumped the gun on me, so go ahead.
Uh uh so we I we just took the show down. Joe and I took the show down on
Oh,
Sunday night, and then yesterday I kind of got people's stuff mostly all packed up um to ship out, and then I had to go to my after school gig, so I didn't ship it. And then but so anyway, so it's really alive in me, like this whole process of doing that. And yesterday when I was said, "Hey, I want to talk about creativity," it was in part because, I some people live locally and they weren't able to pick their work up. So I have their work at my house. I have everybody's work at my house right now.
mm-hmm.
And, getting it up the two flights of stairs, yada yada. And um when I came in to my house, one of the things I did, the show before my show, there was these three little tiny paintings that unfortunately, I can't remember the artist's name, but I love them. And so I bought them for myself.
Mm-hmm.
They're my Christmas present and I put them up
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. So anyway, so I get home and I look at some of the art that's on my walls already. And I realized that two of my favorite paintings that I have are from two friends who I think objectively are much better artists than I am, like really skilled and really beautiful work. and both of them have been on a huge years long hiatus from painting.
Mm.
And so I was just thinking about that, and I was thinking about the various hiatuses that I've taken, mostly having children was a big hiatus in the bakery. I was doing creative, and then just thinking, but I never felt like I wasn't doing creative things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was realizing, like thinking of my friends who aren't painting right now, it's like, well, where is the creativity coming out in their life
Mm-hmm.
was what I was feeling curious about. And and then thinking about anyway, so this is anyway, so this art show was, a year-long process, and it's part of an 8-year process that of this series that I want to do. It's a second in a series. And so it's kind of a part of a huge arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a huge effort to do a show. And yeah, anyway, that was all over the map. Not as I didn't take a nap today, so my map is a little wiggly.
The no nap map.
The no nap map.
I didn't need a map. I was with you. I was
Oh,
with
good.
you.
Oh, good. Oh,
You were
good.
guiding me. Well, you said a couple things there that I feel are really interesting to like just keep to pull strings on, let's pull
Hmm.
through. Because one, you said I have a lot of friends who are artists who are on hiatus or have taken long hiatuses. And then I immediately thought, oh, what does that mean? That's interesting. Like, and
Hmm.
then you said to have children and run a bakery. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's just
Well,
shifting forms of.
that's not their
No, that was
world, but
what
yeah,
you
yeah.
described as like
My
what
own.
two
Yeah,
big
yeah, yeah.
hiatuses.
Yeah.
And so I think when we talk about creativity, then it's really interesting to see how we put boxes around it, because you're
Mm.
like, oh, here's my creative, process. And my hiatus is to have kids or to start this bakery, which are both
Hugely creative processes.
foundationally creative acts, right?
Yes,
Especially, I mean,
yes.
having children would be probably the most foundational creative act, and raising them and then starting a business and, creating everything within that business. These are huge creative acts. It's just that, and I think when we talk about creativity, immediately as Americans, we run into this problem that we have a box around it. Like, this is what creative people look like. This is what they do. And if they're not doing those things, then we don't identify that as creativity. How
Oh,
would you
for
on
sure.
that?
Oh, for sure. And it's, but I do think that just from my own, like when I'm focused on a project, that that process is it's very different than I would say the incidental expressions of creativity that happen in, you know, the process of like I think I was using my creativity muscle a lot during the bakery years, problem solving and coming up with recipes and figuring out events and making ads and like I was but more in a more almost like a practical expression
Mm-hmm.
versus a more spiritual expression, which is what it feels like to me when I'm working on a on a series or on a big project. Does
Mm.
that, I feel like there is
Yeah.
like for me, there's a spiritual component to it that it's like a melding of those things. And so I guess that's what I mean of like having because here's the gig. In order to do that work, I hope you're not getting all these dingies. In order to do that work, I am I kind of need some parameters.
Mm.
I have some like and realizing it's like what are my stumbling blocks to doing like a creative project
Mm-hmm.
versus and I think it's exactly what you were saying about being on the beach is that you have to have the capacity to just be in order to engage
Mm.
versus like being using your creativity as a problem solving skill, or, you know, in a more like as a skill set versus being receptive. Just like you were on, you know, you were like observing like these sculptural forms from nature and just being like, whoa, you know, and being in that space of wonder. And I think that that's, yeah, like what, what happens when our lives are.
Hold on, your cat just blocked your mic big
Oh.
time. We had a literal fur
Oh yeah,
fur
they do. They
covering on your mic. It just
don't they
like
call those things cats?
they do, I think. Yeah, it's funny. Yes, there was a living cat that just walked around.
Right in front of my mic. She's on the
Yeah, I
lap
mean, I
now.
think I understand what you're saying, but I want to just challenge it a little bit because it's funny, and this comes up in my coaching sometimes when I'm coaching people that, you know, I'm not a real artist, or I'm not there is this box around it, right? I mean, and if we talk about creativity and the culture that we're in, I think it's really beneficial to challenge that. I mean, yes, it's different to go to work and bake bread versus hanging an art show, but is it that different? I mean, you know, what's the difference? Really? You had an idea, you were inspired by that idea, you pulled resources together, you made the idea happen. One may or may not be about money. One may or may not be about like the purity of it being separate from any consumable, you know, item.
Mm-hmm.
One may be about being in a gallery because that's a space that's reserved for just art or artistic expression. But I also think that it doesn't really serve us to think of it this way. I mean, yes, you can say pure, I mean, painting or weaving, or you can make categories, right? And these things do fall into they have these little containers around them. But when you're using a word as broad as creativity,
Mm-hmm.
it is what I believe like life force. I mean, it's just the essence of
Mm.
what we are. What are we if not creative expressions on the planet? What is our planet if not one big creative expression? I mean, I often think that Earth, if it is unique for what we can perceive in the known universe, you know, observe with our telescopes and everything, then they say how unique Earth is that, I mean, she is so creative, right? She's like the artist over here just making life form after life form after, I mean, just eons of incredible expressions of unfathomable layers of creative process going on. And Rick Rubin, who is the book I'm reading, I should say, it's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And Rick Rubin's a really famous music producer. You guys don't know, but he started like Def Jam Records, and he's produced almost every famous person you can think of musically. But he's an amazing writer, and this book is really good. It came out in 2023, so it's new. And he talks about creativity as like a cloud of vapor.
Mm.
And I thought that was a really interesting analogy because as I was looking at the mist on the beach, I was thinking about that and how creative energy is always there. It just changes form, right? So moisture, water is a great element that they often associate with creative process. And I think that it's because it's always shifting, changing, but it never really goes away. You know, it's never done. It's like somebody sees something, gets inspired by it, changes form, it comes through a new expression through them. The cloud, you know, evaporates, travels to a new land, rains down, fills a creek, fills a well, somebody drinks it. I mean, there's just like this kind of endless flow all around the planet of nature's creative expression and how that is all interconnected. And a lot of it is through moisture and water, and the flow of nutrients. And then also how we like are connected and expressing and absorbing and changing and morphing, you know, through our own
Well,
life,
and
just our
you,
life, not even trying to like paint or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sculpt or write. It's more like just by being alive, there isn't anyone or anything on the planet that can express exactly how and when and why we, you know, us individually would. but we're all kind of tied together too. I mean, it's really fascinating to think about, but I think that creativity and humanity are, they go hand in hand because we are intrinsically indigenous to Earth, and Earth is incredibly creative. I mean, she is just like, that's what all she wants to do is create.
So I think that this is helping me see that in my mind, I think that I've tended to have them be that my art practice and my inherent creativity are so swirled up that
Mm-hmm.
but they are, I can see because I mean, I'm telling my students all the time, it's like it's a defining characteristic of being human is to
Yeah,
be creative, for sure, and it's like, it's gonna come out somewhere. And so, so I do want to talk about art making as more of a discipline or a
discipline. Yeah.
practice
Mm-hmm.
as and what's the difference between like you know just putting your clothes in the line and putting your clothes in the line in a way that is pleasing to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
pleasing to you while you're doing it. It's pleasing to you when you look out and see them drawing in the line, and it's pleasing to you as you take things off the line and fold them. I mean, that whole
Yeah,
process can be an installation, right?
absolutely.
And
I mean,
so
and a
like,
lot of that goes back to this concept of being aware, of just
yes.
paying attention to, and perspective. Like, you are choosing a perspective that is like, oh, I like them arranged from dark to light or whatever it is. Like,
Mhm.
that is a particular thing that your brain is doing, like observing that, choosing that, arranging that, and then taking pleasure from it, you
Yes.
know? And that's a creative act. Absolutely it is. But it's like hand in hand with having the intention and awareness around it. And
Yes.
it's almost like you could say anything we bring attention and awareness to, like seafoam, all of a sudden becomes wildly creative. But if I'm not paying attention to it at all, it's just some chaotic, bubbles on the, breaking up on the beach. It's just a part of what's going on all the time, all around the world.
Yes.
But me watching it and observing patterns and shapes and labyrinth and, walking path and all the things that my unique brain was bringing to it, that was me being creative, and in relationship to nature being wildly creative as it is, because it just can't help
Yes.
itself, right? So there's a form of like harmony and peace that comes in my body as I drop into that state. I'm not trying to control it, not trying to figure it out, just being with it. Like, wow, I'm a part
So,
of this creative process because I'm the observer and I'm engaging in it now. I'm walking with it. I've changed my walking pattern and my visual range and everything because I'm bringing the perspective of, this is cool, right? I'm into this
well,
right now.
it sounds like play. Like
And playing. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like,
Play is inherently creative, I mean,
yes.
that's all it is. It's kind of us dropping the rules, the rule book that we all live by. We have this set of rules, and when we let that go, I think there it is, we're naturally in creative play, which
Hmm.
I really do think that's what we're here to do. I mean, really, that's life, that's humanity. If there wasn't a economy and all taxes, all the things that we've also developed in our brains to make a society work, I mean, don't you think that as children, you work with children, like we naturally come in a state of kind of creative, playful awareness, of,
Oh yeah. I mean, this wasn't this week's project, but was it last week that we did the pirate maps, the treasure maps, hidden maps I did it with both after school kids, but the younger kids, oh my God, they were it was entire worlds upon worlds upon worlds. It was like instant access to like, and
mm,
it, islands shaped like cats and oh, just yeah, all kinds of stuff. And so instantly. But I see that, I because I work with a bunch of kids and I work with kids in like 4 different school districts and we've talked
and
about
you
this
also work
before.
with adults. I mean,
And
you've
I also
also
work
taught
with
many
adults.
of adults. Yeah.
Many, I do teach adults a lot.
Mm,
Yeah. And I think it's people are people, but I
mm,
see that there's this shift that happens. I've been really thinking a lot about when the children say to me, I can't, or can you do it for me?
Mhm.
Or and then I see even sometimes quite young children will deliberately do it poorly in an
Mhm.
attempt to get me to like detangle it or,
Right.
do it for them. Um, versus the ones that are really earnestly trying to figure it out, like
Mhm.
what's the have you read the Carol Dweck book, Mindset, talking about growth mindset and
Yeah, I
fixed.
mean, I got the book. It's very dry. I couldn't get through it, but I know the
Oh,
theory.
okay. Yeah. So, obviously people, we have those in that when you're in a creative state, you're in that growth
Yeah, it's a
mindset,
growth mindset. Yep.
And
Mhm.
so, but so anyway, so I've been trying to decide like how do I encourage children who their life experience, I think partly it might be temperament, but I think it seems to me right in this moment more to do with how nurtured they are and how um what's the word when someone is precious, like how oh what is beloved is
Mhm.
that's not the word I'm looking for, but just like how 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 much are they just having their needs really met,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I think that we I think what I'm observing is that when the knob for safety gets turned down, your ability to take micro risks, creative risks, is also turned down. So the less safe
Yeah.
you feel, the less exploring you might feel like you can do in
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the amygdala, which is our emergency, survival brain system, when it kicks on, yeah. I mean, like a lot of what it was interesting what Rick Rubin said in this book. One of the parts that I kind of caught my attention was that, most of the emergency system, I mean, the amygdala and things that I've studied about when you go into fear or stress or scarcity, um, shame, all these things that kick in, right? When we're experiencing some kind of trauma from whatever age, but early childhood, especially, we kind of pick up these patterns is, you know, a lot of what happens is how do I fit in? How do I make people happy? How do I please? How do I, how do
Hmm.
I become safe? What is in safety often in a survival brain is get with the group, don't stand out, don't make
Hmm.
waves, make people like you. So there's this kind of like, become average, fit in.
Yes, yes, and it's super intense
And
for
this,
them.
right.
Yeah.
But that is like with the creative self, that is not the impulse. Actually, the impulse is don't be average, right? Like creativity would say, stand out, like push the edge. Like you don't want your thing to look like everybody else's. You don't want to blend in. You don't want to
I
have
don't know
this
if I
be the
agree with
exact same.
that though, because like, I mean, think about playing music with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a lot of pleasure in being part of a creative we. Like
Yeah.
I don't think creativity is is all about, it's not, it's almost like, or
But
maybe
I would
I'm just
argue, that. I mean, like, yes, I agree that there can be creative, can like chorus, like we can be creative
mhm.
together. I don't think it has to be an individual. I don't think it's about individualism. That's not what I was trying to say. But the idea is, even if we're going to create something, we're not trying to do things exactly like they were done before. And if we are trying to sing, let's say, a Christmas carol together, that's exactly the same. You know what I mean? Like, or
Yeah,
happy
yeah.
birthday, the way we've always sang it, right? Just it's a different need that's being fulfilled. It's like togetherness, connectedness,
Versus expression.
repetition, and maybe even like making it sound really good, or it's a different striving versus creativity would, in my mind, be a little different than that. It'd be, how do we change it? How do we make it interesting? How do what is the new thing that I'm bringing to the mix? And so I think not all like acts of art are necessarily maybe even about creative process. It could just be about technique or discipline, or you know what I mean? Like there could be parts where you're and I'm just playing with this idea of what is creative and what isn't. But I do agree with him. I think that if you're looking to be, the creative impulse does not come from wanting to be like everything that's come before, right?
Or I think the creative impulse is not self-conscious necessarily.
Mm,
Like, you know, like I think that the more self-conscious I am during my art making process, the suckier the stuff I make is, the
mm,
more I am feeling like in the state of flow, or a state of, even if I have like an idea of what my intention is, and I'm like, like weaving is really super premeditated, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
and I do weave. So like it's not the only thing I do, but so some of the stuff I do is very premeditative in a lot of ways, but there's also that being open to serendipitous things. And that's a huge part of it, of like not feeling like have to stay on the plan, or like, I don't know. Yeah. It's,
Because when I drum with other people, for say,
yeah, yeah.
um, that to me is not creative. It's funny. It's like it's harmonious. It's listening to each other. It's trying to make it sound good. It's trying to feel each other's energy. It's definitely about the rhythm, and creating a rhythm. But we're not, I'm not like directing, like we're not making music. You know what I mean? In the sense that we're not creating a sound.
Inventing.
We're not inventing a new rhythm. We're playing something that we know that has already been invented, and then we're trying to do it well.
So you're seeing creativity as very generative, is the act of bringing something
Yeah.
in, a like something new into the
Yeah, I
world.
think I am. I think that's why I'm framing it as like it is your own unique expression. Now, if you were to do a solo in that drum, as it were drumming and you were start and you just went off and soloed and it was just coming through you based on what you were listening to. Now that I would think would be your own creative little expression that you brought to the
Mm.
rhythm. And it's really fun to hold rhythm for others while they do that. What, like holding that together while someone else solos for a minute and comes back down and then taking turns. I was just thinking about making music together, and of course it's creative in the sense that we're creating a sound, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying that but creativity is that piece that's just like, oh, I hear this other thing in the sound and now I want to play it. You know what I mean? Something's like generating through me, not, and maybe not everybody hears that, or I couldn't say, does everybody else hear that same? Because I don't think anybody else
Possibility.
would.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's something that I can hear coming through, and it's a weird, it's like when you're dancing, all of a sudden, like
Hmm.
some move, we're all dancing together, but there's a move that comes through you that might be completely just coming out of you from God knows where, that only your body wants to do in that moment.
I feel like I remember thinking, I wrote that I remember thinking as a young woman, feeling like stories when I write, that like sometimes, well, actually I think mostly I feel like stories like are like something you catch.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just there, and it's like, oh, it's like a, like the universe has got a radio station, and it's like, oh, here it is, like it's
Yeah.
definitely, like it's kind of coming through me more than coming from me. And
Yeah, but I mean,
you
when I
know
saw your temple, your matter root temple with the cloths and the sticks, I mean, that came through you. I don't know if that. I mean, where did that come from?
through, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
are you making, so I'm curious about that distinction for you, like things come through or things come from. Like what is that? How are you just making that distinction for yourself?
so it's I think it depends on what part of the process. So like the rug under that the foundation of that installation, which was a 10-foot, for those who didn't see it, was a 10-foot in diameter circular rug that was woven in 7-inch strips that are sewn together. And so the one side is pretty smooth, but the front and back are kind of jaggedy. And um and when I wove that as the foundation for another installation that was also a temple, actually. Um, and so like tons of that process were that's because there's a slight pattern. It's all cream, but there's actually three different fabrics. And if you look at it, you can see that there's like the four directions and there's a pattern in it of like different fabrics that's super subtle. But that was all like I had to measure, like, I don't know how many of them. There's 16 strips, so like, and they all had to match up in order for that to all work. So like that whole process involved graph paper and calculators and like, like super
Oh yeah.
premeditated.
Yeah.
But where did this like, oh, this is what I want to do?
Right. There it
Where
is.
did
Yeah.
that, and then yeah. And then
Yeah. I'm not saying like the other is effortless, like, or that, it doesn't take precision or math or discipline to
but
create
where
the
did
thing.
why did I
But
pursue
why'd
that?
you, but why'd you weave a temple rug at all? You know what I mean? Like there's an idea that came to you at
Yeah.
some point and visited you, and and for whatever reason you're like, this would be a cool thing to do, and then your brain got to work on like how you wanted that to look, how to lay it out. You use skills that you've had from your other things that you know what I mean, like then you pull an
Yes, yeah.
iris pull together all the skills, your foundation that you have, that you've built over time, and created this thing. So
And so yeah, like where like I feel like
it could have only come from you is what I'm saying.
ah yeah. It's and then now it's like that rug is kind of like one of my Lego blocks for installations. I think this is the sixth incarnation of it holding space for something. I got married on it. I think
Yes.
um and like
So I just want to take you back to
yeah.
like your when you started, because I'm
Yeah,
curious,
yeah,
because
yeah.
you are somebody who is living a very, very creative life. Although by my definition, I guess we all are, we can't help but live creative lives. But I heard you make a distinction at the very top of the conversation about taking these hiatuses from, and so go back now that we've kind of explored that a little bit. Go back to
Yeah,
that
yeah.
and just explain to me what you were meant by that.
I think I think what I mean is that and what was really resonating with me yesterday was that art making requires kind of you have to create a container of it, a time space container in order for art making to be able to access the flow state, to be able to like do that kind of work and to be and so I feel like that for me that like if I'm too agitated or it's hard. I can't just like, okay, I have tomorrow off, I'm just going to go down in the studio and you know get something. And I think some people do work like that. I don't. I've never really connected to this idea of the tortured artist. I actually can't really create in that state. Like I can't I can't art my way out of misery. I just can't do anything when I'm miserable. So I have to get into a different I personally need to be in the right state. And like I can actively pursue that more creative state. Like I don't feel like I have to wait for it to show up. Like and I'm motivated to be in that state because I really like making things.
Mm.
So there's a big payoff for me to make stuff. So, I'm willing, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's answering things. It's really intangible, right? But I look at these two paintings in my house and they're so beautiful. And that's a skill I haven't worked on. I don't have that same skill being an
Mm.
oil painter, like I have never done it ever in my life. So of course I don't have that skill. Um, but I'm just curious, like, is it just economics? You know, like in a traditional society, when somebody had a particular gift of observation and being able to like create things from that observation, maybe that's singing, or somebody has like is really running through the universe as a dancer or as a wood carver or whatever. Like, clearly there, I think that whilst I do believe firmly that we all have some way to express ourselves, some creativity, I do believe that's a baseline human thing. It's also true that people come through with they show up with something, and it's not something you earn. Like, there's and like whether or not you put work in, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know. It's like you're playing Monopoly. I hate the Monopoly game, but everyone's played it. So I'm gonna use a Monopoly analogy. You're playing the Monopoly game, everybody gets your little bank, whatever you get. And it's like, oh, and then there's like, you get an extra $500 of this skill, And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, so we're gonna, like the Monopoly game is about um running or something. And some people, they just got the body, like, that is like, you know, that's can run really fast, like kind of like effortlessly. And like they just had the turkey, what do they call it? The turkey trot at all the elementary schools, where
Mhm.
all the kids, I don't know, they're doing laps around the whole outside of the school. And I got to watch them. Were we talking about this? Um, so
No.
I was there at the school that day teaching, and then I was in between my two sessions, and so I was like collating a bunch of stuff on this right in front of this window in the this employee, the teacher workroom. And there's just a steady stream of like third graders loping past. And some of them are like, oh God, like totally slogging. And some of them were like little gazelles. They were just
Mhm.
like, hair flying and just like this, like joyous, like total, just like they didn't, I don't even think they're just like, they were flying.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt. Like we all come in with different abilities. Like I'm not, no one's arguing that. And I think that's the part of the earth being creative, right? Like we come in all different. Like some of us are
Right.
really good at some things are like love this other thing. Some of us would never want to do that. So it's all a mix. And I think where we get stuck sometimes is we're like, oh, well, there are some people, right, who are talented, who can do art, who are creative. They have the creative gene. Like some people can run fast and some people can't, like that. And we're just not creative. We're just gonna not, be able to do that.
But
And I
I
think
think
that,
it's not, that's there's that, like,
mhm,
that.
yeah,
Like, it doesn't mean that if you got the extra $500 towards your creativity or your, running fast or whatever, like everybody's got those. That's what our gifts are.
yeah,
But that doesn't
everybody has
mean
gifts.
but if only the people, one, if only the people that got the extra $500 express that part of being human, whatever that part is, whether it's like being good with math or whatever,
Right.
like it's not enough. We all have to do it. And then we just get to enjoy each other and get to celebrate when we end up in a community, with
Yeah.
Kathryn Claire in it
Right.
or whatever,
Exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
or a
like
musician, but it's a good point that you made about, some people are really good at math, some people are really good at, building things, or, figuring out problems in interpersonal relationships. These are all creative things. I mean, people are
right.
problem solving with and bringing in new ideas and information, and those are all creative acts. So I guess I'm just trying to separate out the visual arts, because I think that's another piece. Like people are creative, look like this, they do this, and baking and mothering and all, making sandwiches and all the things that we do in life, they're all creative. We're all, it's because it's like how we live. You're expressing yourself by even making a sandwich. You are bringing your creativity and who you are and your particular likes and tastes and attention to it. And then you're talking about artistic discipline. And I think that's a different like conversation. I mean, really, when you think about, oh, but some people are willing to and are able to sit down and learn a craft and spend a lot of time on that craft.
Yeah.
And even have the desire to like, yeah, like deeply express themselves through this craft and, make it a huge part of their life and their expression of who they are. That,
And I would say that in our society at this time, and actually trying to um, control the highly creative, especially the skill highly creative with like, a strong compulsion to be creative in specific ways, has been it's always the elite always want to control that. It's like, what is all the art in Europe from like 1000 to, currently, like the church, you either were making art for the church or you were, and so that's what the separation of art and craft, I think, came out
mm,
of that.
mm,
Art was art that was sanctioned by the church,
mm.
and craft is like creative impulse that was not being compensated by the, I don't know. I mean, this is just my
Well,
like
there's,
guesstimation.
yeah, and there's all the, I mean, gender
And
plays into that.
women's,
So women's work were not considered art; they were considered like
yes.
less than, or that's where you have like, oh, I bake bread, but whatever, that ties into this idea that if you're in a gallery, blah blah blah. If you're doing this kind of art, it's worthy. If you're doing other arts, it's not as worthy, or it's not as important, or it's not as artistic, or it's not as great. These are all like mindsets that we've got like deeply inherited in our bodies, including indigenous arts and like,
Yes.
all like these weavings and beadworks and all these beautiful things. Um, and I would say other kinds of spiritual expressions too, that don't look like, you know, marble sculptures and gilded, yeah, paintings that hang over altar pieces. And yeah, all of that. I mean, it's all tied together. So it's really interesting. And Rick Rubin has a good point of like, even if you talk about never having painted ever before, when you start painting, you're still probably going to go buy a piece of canvas stretched over a rectangular frame of wood. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
And that is like, there's already in place this
I
idea of what a painting is.
I did paint
And
a giant poppy on the side of my house.
yeah, like that's a little different. Yeah, you did do that. Exactly. But so I mean but that is it, right? Like we look at certain types of art, we're like, oh, but we haven't done that. We haven't
Right,
put
right,
it in
right.
that context,
And
and
so,
therefore it's not legitimate somehow. It's not real. And not to devalue people who do spend tons of time and make these beautiful things. It's just an interesting, like, even if you think about a movie, like
yeah,
movies
yeah.
are usually so many acts, and they they're this much long, and they have an arc, and or a song is usually like 3 to 5 minutes long, and it has a chorus, and these are all like precepts that we have in our heads about what these things are just from the get-go. So anytime you like create a genre, or these the culture hands us, this is what a song is, this is what a movie is, this is what a, you know is what a hip-hop song sounds like, this is whatever it is, right? And we fall into that. And so it is interesting when you think about, like, to me, the creative people who bust through these genres and they're like, well, I'm not doing that, I'm going to do something totally different, or my book is going to be like, it isn't going to be just this weird, chaptered out little, it's going to be totally something new. And we absolutely, for evolution, I think, need those impulses to come through all of us, right? Because all of us bring, but then we wave them away. We're like, oh, we can't do that because
yes.
that's
And
not
why that's
real.
that's that is a thing that is really
Yeah.
interesting to me right now, because I feel like I have this geese upon me to try to like influence all of these young humans that I'm hanging out
Mm,
with to like believe in themselves creatively, the ones that are not getting, the ones that have tough situations,
mm-hmm,
so like, even though I said it's hard for me to create when I'm really miserable,
mm-hmm,
on the flip side, I think that I do. It's because the practice. It's like it. It is so helpful. Like I don't know. I feel like I'm saying
Well,
both
I think
things.
that misery is generative. I mean, maybe when you talk about artists who suffer, right? I think a lot of times when we go through things, anything that disrupts our standard vision of like how life is supposed to go, when it is disrupted, that is where the creative enters. Like if we're just like marching along, doing our little thing and everything's working out great in the culture and our lives, like I think that's less creative. I mean, then when we're just going with the flow in a way that's like, we're just going to do what everybody else is doing. It's easy. This is working. And then when we get smacked off our happy little trail and when something bad happens, we get broke, we get whatever, ill, divorced, blah, blah, you name it. I think we do enter these spaces of, what do they call that in alchemy? They have the negredo, right? They call it the negredo in alchemy. It's like the darkness, the dark matter that has to be dealt with in order to like alchemize the new thing into being.
Mm.
There's these different colors that alchemists talk about, but the negredo is like you can't avoid that stage of the process of the alchemical process. And so from that darkness comes the new generative thing, right? So I think that, well, doing grief work that I've been interested in and doing any kind of work with shame or any of that, it's not like it's so interesting, creative. Like everything's creative. Like pain is creative. I mean, it's incredibly generative
Yeah.
for who we come out being and what we bring to the table. And I'm not
And so
saying
are
that.
you you're talking about like there's like the mundane world, and
Mhm.
then there's those moments in which we step out of that. And often pain is a doorway,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I think in a lot of ways I became a more creative person because of the childhood I had. It was not very normal. I got kind of shook up. I didn't want I couldn't fit in because I didn't have the money and the family that would have allowed me to fit in. And so I just embraced the otherness that was kind of my creative self, who wanted to be a little punk rocker who wore ripped clothes anyway. Kind of worked out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the defiance of the music that I liked, and it was just kind of like it worked for me, and it set me on a different trajectory where I was like, I was free then to, yeah, look what I want, listen to what I want. It made me more creative, for sure. It did. I can look back and honor that. It
Well, I
wasn't.
do think about that. Like if you are other in some way,
Mhm.
then you as a young person have to confront that, and I
Yeah.
think like, like there is for those who are, very neurotypical and have the life trappings that allow them to be kind of like in the middle of the road. I think
Mhm.
that there's a certain painfulness to that because you aren't free to there's a certain constraint to being there versus when you have no choice because you're
Mhm.
kind of a wingnut, as was me, or if you're gay, or if you're,
Mhm.
some
Yeah.
other otherness, you have to just kind of come to terms with and accept yourself
And
from
create
a
yourself.
and create
Yeah.
yourself from a pretty
Mhm.
early age. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a gift, even though at the
It's
time, of course, I
painful.
would have loved to have fit in better, but
Yeah.
I couldn't understand. It was befuddling to me.
I think that had we lived in a culture that really communicated that the purpose of our lives was to create our unique individuality, like our self-expression, and had we been, instead, because we live in an extremely conformist culture. I mean, everything about it is like conform, conform, conform. This is the way you should look. This is the way you should act. This is the kind of job you should have. This is what we value. We value this. And if you're not this, you're not doing it. You're not, you're a loser. You're not working out. Like, so in America, it is, yeah, I mean, it's not creative in the sense that it likes the other, it likes to be challenged. However, when someone does excel if they rise to the occasion and they push the edge too far, then America's like, oh wow, you're innovative and we love you now. But usually, like, the artists that are really famous in the time that they are living, they're doing something that the culture actually doesn't like. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like they're
yeah.
shaking it up. They're not
Well,
the
it,
ones that
it,
are like,
it
they're not embraced until they get to a point where it's like, oh, this is where everyone's going now. Like the Beatles or, like Elvis or
yeah.
whoever, like all these artists were like, at first, like, oh, no, you can't do that. And then it's like, oh no, this is where the youth are going. Like, this is what's happening. And Rick Rubin was interesting. They said it does kind of swell up in movements. Like people do challenge the same like conformist moments together in different ways. Like art movements tend to kind of happen together, and writing movements
Which does
emerge
make me
as a
think
group.
about, it does make me think of like the collective unconsciousness
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it
like,
is.
like the 100th monkey thing,
Totally. And
like,
what's yeah, go I mean what's interesting is that it feels like creativity, like you mentioned, is a channel. It's like something's trying to come through. And what feels like what's trying to come through is kind of an evolutionary growth, change it up impulse that happens in nature. Nature's doing that constantly. We are part of nature. So it makes sense that at certain places, when even though, and here's the conflict, the survival parts of us want comfort and safety more than anything else. Like we just want the known. Like we want to be in a safe, known, comfortable environment. It's what we want as a physical being, to be safe and comfortable. And yet there's this other impulse that's in nature that's like, but you don't get to do that, because as soon as you're safe and comfortable, there's like this itchiness, right? Like that things start to emerge and come through that wants to shake it up, change it, make it different, try this, try that. And it's really fascinating to me now that the communication is so fast with how we're all wired together through the great World Wide Web, is like, I just noticed that things are just like extremely they're happening so fast. Like waves that the surf wave, height that would have been surf for this many years, all of a sudden it's just exponentially. Guys are just like, oh no, we saw that. Now we can do this. Now we can, like, the inspiration of people seeing each other doing exceptional things is happening so quickly that people are just taking it to this next level, next level, next level. It's there's like this exponential kind of, you know, rise in things that people are doing. I don't know. That's what it seems like to me. Or maybe we're just able to see it and witness it.
uh, uh,
Um,
uh. Well, I
it's
mean,
like
I do think
wildly
time is
creative.
different.
It's wildly creative, but it's also kind of performative, which is weird too, because it's also now for the likes and because you are being observed.
Oh, and okay,
Yeah.
so this is the observation and the like inherent value
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like sometime we need to talk about um social capital versus the money system,
Mm.
because
But the observer is a key part
the
of a
observe
conversation on creativity, right? Because
yes, yeah.
why are we being creative? Like who are we doing this for? This
So
is big.
I just want to talk about my show.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. So for me, but
A
so
really big deal.
it was a really big deal. So I invited 12 other artists. So there were 13 artists. There was actually so there was 13 artists, but they were coming into a skeleton structure that I said, this is what I want to do. So I sent them a prospectus and they said, yeah, I'm in. So there was some collaboration around some of it, but really I was the arbitrator of all, right? So like I created a whole installation of the whole gallery, and then within that there were all these like little rooms, right?
It's very cool.
So that's the gig. So the gallery is a nonprofit, it's artist run. They do have, one paid person. They might have a couple of paid people now because they're doing an after school thing. But bottom line is they're only open a few hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So 327 people saw my installation in person.
Mm.
Right. But I also was on the front page of the weekly newspaper
Yeah.
that went out, and so like I don't know what that circulation is. I should ask them. So then there's all the people that saw that,
Mm-hmm.
and it was literally like one of the last weeks of them printing it here in Astoria, which
Mm.
is an interesting thing. But and then Instagram, I like featured all 12 artists, and then I featured myself after the show was over because I got a little behind. But and so that is thousands of impressions
Yeah.
of people seeing the show. So like the reach of the show, does it feel different to be in there physically? 100%. Like,
Mm,
because it's a full sensual experience. Like you can't get it from looking at a screen, that when you're inside of my installation, for instance, that you feel kind of like disoriented, and sound is different, and the light is different, and the walls are moving, and like, like
yeah.
that. It's a very visceral, it was a very visceral experience to be outside of it and to walk in it. I mean,
Yeah.
for me too. Like
Yeah.
and I don't know if that was your experience, but
For sure.
so like, why did I bring this all up?
We're talking about the audience, the
So
importance
the
of the
audience,
audience to the
so
creative
like,
process.
so to do that show,
Mm-hmm.
no one there, nothing was for sale that I did. Some of the artists had work for sale,
Mm-hmm.
but like there, I'm like, well, I could dismantle, I could take all those 40 yards that I dyed matter, and I can turn them into things that I could sell in the future. So it's like, it's not like a total loss, but like I have, I had probably $2,000 in materials.
Mm-hmm.
Like not everything, I didn't buy everything this year because I've been doing this a long time. So like I had that bolt, I bought that bolt of wool a couple years ago, like, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't shell out in 2024 $1,200 or $2,000 or whatever, but I, I did shell out hundreds of dollars for something that I couldn't sell
Yeah, but that.
entirely for the people to experience. So like that was like this
Hmm.
huge gift that I was giving to complete strangers, really, with like, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like,
No, this is really interesting because it's interesting that you would say that was a gift I'm giving to complete strangers. That's a really interesting way to look at that. Is that how you see the show?
oh yeah. Like eh, I don't, people, I was super psyched for the people that I know and love to get to experience it. And that's like super
No, no, no.
sweet.
I want to bring it back to you because
Yeah.
obviously the person who did this, who arranged it all, who put all this time in, no, I mean, I have no idea how many hours of time this took you, much less like quantifiable dollars and materials. But like, I would think, I mean, it's just interesting to hear you say it was for the audience because I would think you did it for you. Like, it was your idea that you wanted to bring to fruition in this certain way in your mind, and you did it. And then we were all just kind of like, cool, Iris, you did that.
Well, I think I do
Because when I came, that's just, and I came
yeah,
and I was
yeah.
like, of course I was gifted by it for sure. How cool it was, how imaginative, how you did weave all the different artists together and all the ways they worked with the material and the story behind the root. And it was super cool. But in my mind, it's so interesting because I always think of artists like that doing it for themselves. And then we just get the benefit of, you know, being in community with cool people doing cool stuff that they want to do.
Which I do think there is a certain like that is part of the like archetypal role of the artist, is to help permission people to express themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's that. But no, I would say that doing a show is like is in service
Mm.
for me. Like I feel like it's like if I do something, like if when I make myself clothes, because I do that a lot, that's for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I like,
But I'm just saying, there's nobody on the street. I'm just playing
yeah,
a little challenging role for
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm not sitting around being like, wow, I really wish there was a gallery full of madder root. Like, you know
No,
what I
no,
mean?
nobody's clamoring for it.
No one's
Absolutely.
clever. And like, so like the person in the world, like the creative channel, let's just say, if the muse is floating around and they picked you because the matter fairies were like, this is the one who's going to do this for us. She's actually going to make this happen. They showed up in your dreams or on your sketchbook or
Yes,
whatever. And were like,
yes.
you, Iris, have been tapped to create this cool thing for the planet for for whatever reason. Like, why do flowers bloom? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like, you're the flower that's going to bloom with this particular vision, and you do it. I guess, I mean, it is a gift. It's a gift to all of us, but like, it's interesting to me that you would be like, well, I put this much money in. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I did all this work as a service to my community, when really it feels more like you were gifted with this like energetic flow that
Oh,
came
yes,
through you,
yes,
you know,
yes.
like, and then you did all, yes, you did work. There's no doubt about it, of pulling it all together. And then there is a space in there that I think if I guess this is where the audience comes in. And I think this is where people get like stuck, or at least I can get stuck. Like, if it's about other people, then we're looking for a certain response from them to make ourselves feel validated that we did good enough, or we did the right thing, or it was worth our time or worth our money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So, and of course, in the culture of art, it's like people buy my things. Therefore, I'm a real artist. I'm validated, or, you know, people respond to it in some way. Critics, somebody, you know, shows up. But what if none of that happens? Do you know what I mean?
That's so I would say that there's a continuum in art. On one end, art is a commodity and it's an investment and it's really to serve the wealthy.
Mm,
Like it's has little, you know, like it's like art as
like stocks almost,
yeah, like, you
or
know, they use it
jewelry,
to
or
launder
yeah,
money and
yeah,
like they
the
have
things to have,
art and
right?
or just have it in
Or
warehouses. I
or
mean,
high
it's
fashion, like there are like streams where it's like, yeah, it's just a commodity to show off, and
or not even show off. I mean, it might be just like in a warehouse.
right,
So like it's part, I don't know, I lost the
it's
word for it.
treasure, it's treasure trove.
It's
Yeah,
whack. And then
yeah,
on the other end is like somebody making embroidering a a christening gown or something for
yeah,
for their grandchild, you know, so
right,
like,
extremely
or,
personal.
you know, super personal, completely outside of the economy.
Yeah.
And so like when I like the bird show, I was making those and hoping to sell them, right? So like,
Mm,
you know, so there was an energetic exchange of people getting to like talk to them about the work, and then there's like I actually got paid because I sold all of them, and like, you know, so like that's somewhere in the middle. And then
mm.
when I do installation, I know it's not gonna, I don't know why I feel compelled to do installation because there's no money in it. So, and
Oh, well, there's the capitalist talking. There's capitalist culture,
right,
right?
yeah,
You
right, so
heard,
it's
why do it if
crazy
there's no money in it? Like,
there,
in
yeah,
the
it's totally
capitalist culture
crazy.
we in, that is a waste of time, and that's crazy.
Yes,
Right?
it's totally
Just, I just
crazy.
wanted to catch that. There's the thought that's
Yes,
coming directly from the culture,
yes.
which is why I think that's why I challenged you when you said it's a gift, because in the capitalist culture, if you're not getting paid, right, for all the
Then
work
it
you
better
just
be a
did, then
gift.
it better be a gift.
Oh, that's ouch. But
No, no, no. I
maybe
mean, I think it's interesting. I think it's just interesting because we are all, like I said, everybody listening to this are creative, and we create all the time. And we have to really examine like where the culture weaves into this. And I think strips some of the magic or joy or spirituality out of it for people. And that is one of them right there. The commodification of time, right? Just like, what is
it's
this worth? What is it worth in a culture that is weird around creativity? Like, we don't have a clear,
oh, we our
um,
society is very hostile in some ways towards creativity.
yeah. And I think
Like,
for this very reason, because if you're doing things that are outside of the like capitalist box, like if you're having a creative life that doesn't have to do with purchasing and selling and like the things that we're told are important and valuable, then you're challenging the system directly. Like, they're valuing things that don't have anything to do with money or status, or, you know, attaining a different rung on the ladder of where, you know, we all are trying to go up and down on. So that's where creativity is really interesting, because, you know, it's coming through, I already talked about, it's coming through a part of us that we don't really understand. Like, it's
right.
like, if you sit down and write a poem, where the hell does that poem come from? It's just, it kind of shows up. And especially if you're in a writing group or something, and like they
Yeah.
give you the same prompt and 10 people come up with 10 different poems, it's pretty amazing, really. Like,
Yes,
where the hell
yes.
did that come from? Like, It is a relationship between you, the person you are, and your channel, right? Your inner muse. And why do you create the poem? Yeah, no one pays me to go to a writing group and sit and write. You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird.
Right,
Like,
right,
if
right,
if
exactly.
that thought comes on from the culture, none of it makes sense. It's just kind of a waste of time.
But it's still,
But it's our
it
humanity. It's like
we
it's
want it. What,
yeah,
like,
it's
it
like
has,
we
yeah.
swim, we breathe it. We cannot not be it. It is. And so all of it, we are creative energy. That's all we are, I think. And then it's all about how we label it, dissect it, think about it.
And so I do feel like that in a way that maybe that part of why I feel compelled to do installation and to do collaboratives and to do community installations where I involve people, which are all things I feel very drawn to doing and
Mhm.
keep doing. I think part of it is that it is saying there is another currency that it's not, and I value that other currency.
There it is. Yeah.
And so, it is like it's I mean, I'm in the days right after taking a showdown. And so, I'm in that kind of like it's super duper vulnerable to do that work,
Mhm.
to like mount this crazy huge incomprehensible thing, and
Mhm.
and to like invite this public, like make no you know don't be fooled into thinking that's easy.
No, I think I
Like,
mean, if there's a gift inherent in what that is, I think it is that you just named it. It's you being vulnerable enough to bring so much of your vision into actual form and invite people to come and see your vulnerable, like what you care about. Like, this is what I care about. This is what I value. And this is the way I'm arranging it for you to look, you know what I mean? But and I think that is a gift, of course, because then it permissions us to go these places as well, right? It permissions us to be like, think about things differently and think about color differently. That's the conversation I was having with Kelly after we saw it. We're just really talking about the power of color and red in particular, and that keeps coming through every time I see the color red. It's just been a theme that doesn't stop since I saw that show.
nice.
Yeah, and I know, and so, but everybody is going to bring their own piece from it, right? Like, you can't
Yeah.
control what everyone's reaction is or what. So I don't know. It's kind of like putting on a super amazing outfit and like walking down the street, and it's like, here I am. This is part of what, like Penny, our friend Penny, who just wears
Oh
these
yeah.
amazing outfits and that people get to have their own feelings about them. And that is gifting the world. Absolutely. You're gifting it with your true authentic expression, you know? But I think the way I caught you, because I think the way you were thinking about it, you were starting to commodify it. Like
I
it's
guess
such a different way of thinking about, like, well, I did all this time and energy and like, what a gift that I did all this hard work for you. Like, that falls back to me into like this kind of, and I've done events where I've thought that exact thing, where I've put on shows at my place, rituals and food and the whole, and I felt like, wow, I really did a lot, for you. But to
yes.
me, that does not honor that I really was doing it for me. Like, there was
Well,
so much of it
I think
was
it's a
for me.
both and thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, like it's very like all the like getting to like work with these materials and getting to I grew plant, like I mean like the whole process clearly is
Yeah.
how I want to live my life, right?
Yeah.
And I wish that we lived in a society that had like universal basic income so that I could just do this kind of shit all the time and
Totally.
set up little healing huts at every hospital in the land, and like oh my gosh, like I would, and I guess I was just really thinking about like why I brought up that there's a cost is because there is this sticky thing that people say to people who are working artists, as though there's this, there's a sticky way that's kind of unpleasant to be the recipient of. And most artists I know have had these comments directed at them.
Mhm.
And I definitely have, of like, oh, well, at least you love what you do, when you're like desperately broke and like
Mhm.
trying to like hustle and figure out how you're going to pay your mortgage.
Mhm.
I've definitely been in that position. And
Mhm.
to have people be like, oh, well, and it's like, or you're getting really underpaid,
Mhm.
and people ask musicians all the time to play for free,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's like, the reality, I do want people to recognize that, though the arts, I believe, really are mostly happening in the kin work economy, or in the
Mhm.
social capital economy.
Yeah.
Like because it's priceless, not because
Yeah.
it's worthless.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now we're confronting the other side of that. Like you said, it's both and that the culture itself won't pay for it. You know what I mean? So it devalues it on all fronts. Right. So then if you're going to take time away from the paid culture and create space for this other thing, then yeah, you have to fight for your right to exist because mortgages have to be paid and rent has to be paid and bills, that's not going to, the juggernaut is not going to stop because you want to be creative.
Right.
And wouldn't it be beautiful and when we talk about nurture culture, these are the spaces we envision. Wouldn't it be amazing if culture was so invested in creativity that it was like, oh yeah, that's, we had so much more time, like, yeah, universal health care and, basic income taking care of that. And what amazing solutions would arise just from letting people have the time, to yeah, bring about changes like that. Just like from natural expression, like, oh, I have this idea for this thing, and I think actually have time to, and there's some resources to pull it together. So if we're going to live in a culture that's strangely like, because it's capitalism and you have this a little bit of freedom to be like, I have a creative idea and I can get funding and go do, there is that in the culture that we live in. Those things, you can go get things done. However, you also have like this juggernaut. If you're not already wealthy or if you don't have funding, like you're going to get swallowed by just, having to do the things that you have to do to survive. And things do take
Yes.
time. Some of
Yes.
these practices, I mean, I think about, they look at indigenous cultures that still are on the planet. I mean, they spend most of their time being creative. It's a fallacy that they're working really hard, like trying to find roots and berries.
Yeah.
It only
Yes.
takes up
Yes.
a very
Yes.
small amount of their time. Actually, their basic needs are met very quickly as a community, and then they spend a lot of time, most of their time, resting and doing creative things, like
Yes.
hanging out or making art of some kind or doing spiritual things. I mean, that is, and if you want to think, that's where all of our roots go back to. We're really designed to be creative, like, and not do
Yes.
much else.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
as we work as a group cohesively together, we could meet our basic needs quite quickly. It is the effed up system that we live in that has us all in this like hyper individualistic path that we have to recreate the wheel over and over. Everybody's got to have their own lawnmower and blah, blah, you know what I mean? Like it's inherent that we are drained of time, that we don't come up with this, that we don't have this leisure, which is, it's true. I mean, when Rick Rubin's book, he's like, you have to be really disciplined. Like you mentioned the word discipline about the rest of your life, like about what you have to get done in those hours so you can create these bubbles where you can be creative.
Yes. Yes.
And your
Exactly. So,
creativity depends on like your ability to be disciplined on the heart, like on the other stuff. Like you have to get up, do your exercise, whatever you need to do to give yourself this little bubble of play, which is
yes.
what children obviously, they're having given to them being children. But like as you get adults and you enter into the economy, yeah, you got to make
And
those spaces. And that is a huge challenge. And I think when they talk about the starving artists, it's the people who are like, I'm going to give more. I mean, to the economy is going to brutalize me, right? I'm not going to have what I need, but I'm going to continue to create anyway. Like they're the ones who are willing to like make that trade-off. And it shouldn't have to be that way, you know?
exactly. And I think that I do want to say, I saw a bumper sticker whenever it was, because it was a couple months ago when we were last in Portland. that said artwork is work. And I do want to, like,
Yeah.
I do think it's true that deeply true that we are all creative.
Yeah.
And I think that I would like for people to think about what it means when people in their community have are devoting themselves to some creative expression,
Yeah.
and the value that that provides us, because I think it's a lot, like I want I part like somebody said this to me a number of years ago of like, I want to be wealthy because I want to support all these people who are doing things that I appreciate,
Mhm.
like, and can you, I mean, how great it would be to be like, like I just what if everyone was not having their creative urge squished at a young age, so that I mean, all the cool shit that would be happening all the time, it's there, the potential, it's all within us. I just want
Mhm.
it. I want it. I want it. I want it to be out there. And I want people to um I want people to question what they think of creativity. And I want people to question what they're imagining in the life of artists. If they're feeling like they're not an artist, I want people to kind of investigate, like, what is it like to be an artist? And I yeah, and yeah, I guess I'm really aware right now that it's a lot of work. And I think people tend to think it's pleasurable, so therefore you don't get credit for it being work. But I want credit for it being work, because it's a lot of work and it is involves sacrifice, right?
Mhm.
Like
Why do
it
you want credit for it being work? I'm just curious.
because for all the other people that are doing creative work too, because I think that we need to value it, and we need to take it so that it's not only being leveraged against us. We're only place that you can reliably get paid as an artist is doing graphic design work, and or like industrial design, or like, so
Mhm.
like industry and corporations pay artists a lot. So and so it's like, if we want art to be a thing that brings our communities together, and if we want art to be a thing that feeds us,
Mhm.
then we need to change how we think about it. And I think as long as we think of it, because I remember seeing this woman saying, I've stopped giving quilts to family members that ask, because they're not getting what a huge ask that is, because they don't quilt. And she's like, I only give quilts to those that I am choosing to make it for someone. Does
Hmm.
that, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like, I think, yeah, yeah, I'm
I
not,
think what I'm here, well, I think what I'm hearing too is that, you want it to be considered work because that's what the culture values. The culture
yes,
values work. It doesn't value play. It doesn't value time spent in creative play and joy. And it doesn't value pleasure. I mean, honestly, it doesn't.
right.
It doesn't value that people should get paid for pleasure. And I mean that whole
I
thing,
think it pisses people off. It
well, we
pisses
can have,
people off.
because people are working so hard. You know what I mean?
Yes,
And I think that again, if we're talking about the system over and over and over again. It's like, this is not a system that wants creative artists to be playing. You know what I mean? It's like, get in line and be productive. That's what this culture values. We are in a very machine mechanistic production based culture. And it's very puritanical too. And it's very conformist. Like, there's lots of layers here that and so asking the culture to value it as work, I would argue that's the wrong. I mean, for me, that's like, yeah, good luck with that. And also, why? Like, don't ask the culture to permission anything. It's not going to. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not asking you. We have to change the whole conversation. That's the way to do it. We don't talk about it like, oh, I want this to be honored from this culture as hard work. Why don't we talk about, like, we're just I mean, why can't we just not have that conversation at all and just be like, because it's pleasurable? We do it because it's pleasurable and we value that, you know?
Mm.
These are the values, we're talking about two different value structures and like trying to get one to honor the other. And I think that every time we go to the culture with our hat out being like, can't you see the environment's important? Can't you see art is important? The answer is no.
Well,
Like
oh no, of course, yeah, but
it's like
it's
that's why you can't ask the system that created this, that struggle,
well,
fix
if
it.
yeah, and I do think that it's okay for us to look at how do we want effort to happen in our, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
like and
I'm
it's
not
like
arguing with anything that you said is wrong.
okay,
I'm just saying that it is positioning it as like it's like almost giving power to a thought form by, going to it and being like, I want to, be valued as hard work. And of course, everything, I mean, I get that. I totally get that. No argument there. And yet there's a part of me that just feels like, why do we have to do that? Um,
well, I think it's the
Maybe
reason
we're
I
getting
think that
too
we
in the
need,
weeds about
yeah, we need to go. I think the thing that, well, just because when I do sell work
it. Mm-hmm.
and when I'm trying to price it and I'm interfacing with galleries,
Oh yeah.
usually they're wanting, they're not asking me what feels like a fair exchange for the work that you put into this piece. They're only looking at like, well, what is the market bear? And like, it's this
Oh,
really
for
wacky
sure.
thing, which is why I think it's part of contributing factor to why I like doing installation,
Yeah. Yeah,
because
because it
it's
takes it
like
away from that
takes
realm.
it out of that whole thing because it
Yeah.
just pisses me off
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so
that's
much. It's
that's that's capitalism, right? It's like what can we get for it? It's like that feels to me the same as like going to a forest and being like, what is this worth? You
right.
know, and board square feet of lumber, yeah, it's worth, this is what we can get for it. But what is it worth
Right. Exactly.
as a
And so
standing forest?
and
I mean,
so
that
that
is a
there
value structure that you cannot, you understand? Like that's what I was trying to say. Like one system cannot honor the value system of another. You can't force it to be like, and that's why environmentalists are like, no, but it's worth this, it's worth it. No, the culture, I mean, the culture we're in is like, no, not to that culture. The culture is it's like, it's only worth what we can make it into, you know, lumber and sell it for later. It's not as a standing, beautiful thing that's making oxygen and cleaning water and doing all that and just being a biodiverse, which is what creativity is. I mean, nature is creativity in its unbridled form. It is just creation. And asking what it's worth or how much work it takes for that forest to do what it's doing. Do you know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
why
yeah.
I'm like that's why
Okay.
I'm pushing back on the question. It's like it's the wrong question. That question's never going to be answered. It's just we as individuals have to do the work of being like, my creative life is valuable. I don't care how many hours it took me to do X, Y, and Z, and that you think that's worth this. I think it's worthy. And when the culture follows us, when we decide that's worthy, then that's what's going to happen. But it's not going to be the other way around.
Well, I mean clearly, like
It's an inside job first. Like
oh
we have to
yeah.
honor our own creativeness, that we are creativity in action, that we are not production machines with to-do lists that we've, because we are still stuck in that. And I think that when we get into the creative process, it's like, to me, well, I just want to read this little quote to end because we do have to get out. This is Rick Rubin. Talent is the ability to let ideas manifest themselves through you. And I think that's so great because talent is one of those things what we were talking about. Like certain people have a certain amount of, gifts when they come in. But if talent is the ability to let ideas manifest themselves through you, then the job of the creative person is to try to unpack as much filter shit that the culture has put in you that's blocking your channel. And we are all channels. We are born to be that. We cannot escape it, whether you like it or not. And I just wanted to like leave that there because talent is one of those things that people are like, oh, artists have talent and I don't. That would be one of the, key, like creative. I'm just not creative. I don't roll like that. And I do think that, first of all, everything is creative. Everything you're doing is creative. Your life is creative, and talent is just getting out of, getting the culture out of your way. And I do think that. Iris doesn't. What do you think?
I I'm just like sitting with, yeah, I I'm not I'm I'm f- I'm feeling, what am I feeling? I'm feeling a little like hackles up a little bit. And I think part of it is I'm trying to decide, is that me wanting to be exceptional?
Mm.
I'm trying to fuss out that, but I think part of it is like I'm giving myself credit that I take a lot of risks that other people absolutely wouldn't with my
Mm-hmm.
creativity, and I do those publicly over and over and over again. And I am giving myself credit for, like,
Yeah,
and
for
that I
sure.
think is part of like
Well,
kind of like doing the debrief of my thing of like figuring out like, well, how much did it cost me to do that?
but I mean,
Which
you've
is,
been on this path for a long time.
yes,
You as an individual have been on the path of unfiltering the culture for a very, very long time in your life. Like, you've been taking pieces out and trying things out and starting all kinds of amazing, ingenious, co-ops and blah, blah, blah throughout your whole existence, your adult. I mean, you've been doing this work. So
yes,
risk taking and vulnerability for sure are in the package, right? But that, I would argue, is that you've cleared your channel. You are no longer afraid to, when this thing's come through, you are no longer afraid to get the gallery space and to like, you have,
Oh,
you've cleared some
I
of that.
wouldn't say I'm not afraid.
Well,
I
you trust you have a certain level of trust in yourself.
yes.
No, that fear is not, yeah, you'll take the risk over the fear, which means that there's a certain level of
Yes,
trust, and that I would indicate that that's a clearing of a channel, and that you've done the work that in your life to do that, which hopefully this podcast is helping other people do. Just by having these
yes.
conversations,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
get you to question the filters that you have in place over your creative life.
And I can see from this conversation that I indeed have some very fixed ideas about what creative presence is. And I
As
think
do
that
I. I mean, as do I, as do everybody. Like 100%. I do recommend The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin, that I've been living with the last couple of days since you put this topic in front of me. But I think it's just a really interesting, like, there's no right or wrong answers here. We're just playing around, but it's really interesting for me and very freeing to think about it that way. Like, that talent is just like letting something come through you, that creativity is our birthright, like all these things just really feel empowering. So yeah, just wanted to.
Awesome. Thank
Okay,
you, Mama.
thank you. Love you.
I totally love you. This is
Yeah,
good.
and you're definitely one of the most creative, I mean, in terms of like the channel being open, for sure, Iris, like, you're one of the most creative people I know in terms of just letting yourself live that life. And it's very inspiring and beautiful to watch, to be around those people. That is the light that I think, when those channels are clear and we start shining our light, that's absolutely how the rest of us light up. That's the gift, is just to clear the
Yes.
channel and let it come through. Absolutely. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, onward to solstice. Here we go.
Oh, yeah.